Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Dirt Bike Channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to make these little babies work for you. These are GoPros that I have used, that a lot of you guys are using out there on the trails, and a ton of people have a ton of questions about what settings should I use, what frame rate should I be on, what resolution should I have, should I use Protune, should I not? We're going to get into some of those things today to see if we can help you make your GoPro footage look a little better. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the mounting options that you have. A lot of you guys have probably seen me talking or seen some of the videos that I've put out recently about these ProShot camera mounts. This is my new favorite camera mounting position, at least for the GoPro, because it puts this thing right so it sees, the camera's gonna see exactly what you're seeing, and you're also able to talk and you're able to hear your audio, especially if you use like the skeleton back on these GoPros. So this is my very, very favorite mounting position now of anything that I've seen. On an older helmet that I have used quite a bit, and you've seen on the channel, I have mounting positions here on the side to hook a GoPro here on either side of my helmet, and I also have it on the rear in case I wanted to do rear facing shots, which is also, in fact, I would use one of the cameras on the side would be pointing back to the rear. This camera sometimes it would be pointing to the front, and then this was just an alternate mounting location that I had here for the rear. Some guys will put them on the top of the helmet. I don't like that angle as much because I think it really flattens everything out and really slows the overall footage down. Some guys have a way to mount them up here on the visor. I don't like that as much because the visor isn't as secure. Some guys will jam them up underneath the visor. I don't like that because I want my visor all the way down to be able to block the sun, and so it's not catching a ton of wind. When the visor is up, it ends up catching a bunch of wind for me, so I don't like it there. I like it up on the front of the helmet now. There's also, and you guys that have watched the channel for a long time have seen me have seen footage from the chest mount. Now, I've used the chest mount a lot in the past. The only downside to the chest mount is it brings it down lower, so when you're on the bike you end up seeing a lot more of the bars, and it tends to be a little bit more bouncy. Your head is just a little bit more stable, and so the video looks a little bit more fluid when you use it up on your helmet, I think. Plus, then when you use it up on your helmet, it sees what you see. If you turn your head, it sees that stuff. When you have it on your chest, it doesn't. You just look straight forward. Even if you look to the side, the video doesn't see where you're looking. So that's a little bit of a downer. But I also will bring this on a lot of the rides just so that I can maybe hook this to a tree, wrap this around a tree stump, wrap this around a sagebrush, and use it as kind of a makeshift tripod out there on the trail if I want to catch myself doing something. Or I can set this down on the ground now with this mount, and then just kind of just shoot it that way. And then ride through the shot. So I still use the chesty a lot because it's a nice tool to have when I'm out there on the ride. So let's talk about some of the video settings now. Now, a lot of this is going to depend on what you actually want to do, what type of video you want to shoot, and what the shot is supposed to look like in the end. For the purposes of this video, I'm mostly just going to be talking about point of view footage that you're going to get out of your GoPro out on the trails. The very first thing that you need to do is select the resolution that you want to film at. So for most of us right now, it's late 2015, that's going to be in 1080 resolution, 1080p. That's going to give you its full HD resolution. I know a lot of these GoPro cameras can shoot in 4K, and so maybe you will want to shoot in 4K. But for most of us, we're just going to be using a practical 1080p video, and we're going to shoot that on a wide viewing angle. Now on your GoPro, you can actually set down from wide, and you can go medium on some of the settings, and then narrow, and that's going to be your actual field of view. The narrower video settings will be good for actually capturing video off the bike, but most of the stuff you're going to do for shooting on trails point of view is going to need to be the wide angle. You can even go super wide on some of these, like the Hero 4 will allow you to do super wide. Just be advised though, the wider that you get, the more that can kind of like give a curvature to the whole earth there. It flattens out what the footage looks like, but it also gives like a curvature to the earth. So there's lens distortion when you're using that really, really wide angle. So, but I generally use the wide angle and 1080p. Another setting that I will do on the GoPro is I will change it over to Protune. You'll hear me kind of scrolling through some of the menus. I'll turn Protune on, and that gives me a few more options when I'm going to edit this stuff in post. One of the things that I don't like about GoPro footage is that it's very, very heavy. The files are very big, and you can clog up hard drives with GoPro footage. Don't ask me how I know. But I'll turn Protune on because that gives me a little bit more of an ability to edit the contrast and edit some of the colors in post. I'm not a full-time video editor, some of you guys probably are, but I do end up doing a little bit of tweaking and kind of drop the black levels. Sometimes I'll boost the high levels, the brightness levels in certain areas, just so I can get a little bit more dynamic range out of my footage after after I've got it into my editing software. And so I'll do some of that in post. Let's see, one of the other things, as far as frame rates, how many frames per second are you going to shoot? So with some of the newer GoPros, the older GoPros, you probably only could do 30 frames a second. On the newer GoPros, you can choose anywhere from like 24 frames a second, or 30 frames a second, or 48 frames, 60 frames a second, all the way up to 120 frames a second. Here's a little rule of thumb. On the GoPro stuff, I like to try to stay either 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second, or 120 frames a second. The reason why is because all the video that I end up producing is going to be like 30 frames per second. That's what my output file is going to be. Every once in a while, if I only do something on the GoPro, I can put it out at 60 frames a second. Now, why does that really matter? 24 frames per second is what you see all the Hollywood movies on. 30 frames per second will make that video look a little bit smoother. 60 will be even smoother. 120, it gives kind of an unnatural look to the video if you're always doing everything in 120 frames a second. But just because you filmed at 120 frames a second doesn't mean you can't have your output video be 30 frames a second. So a lot of the time when I've been using this Hero 4 GoPro, because it can shoot in 120 frames a second, sometimes I've been shooting it at that just in case I want to slow any of that footage down. If I know I'm not going to slow any of it down, a lot of times I'm just going to shoot at 30 frames a second, and sometimes even 60. So you can kind of make a determination of what you want to do. Just know that if you're going to slow the footage down, you need to take a faster frames per second, or frame rate, FPS. So that's what you've got on your GoPro. You've got FPS of 30, 60, 120, whatever you want to do. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're just going to be shooting a video of your friend doing something, and you're just going to hold the camera and watch him go off a jump or something like that, you don't need to shoot in anything more than 30 frames per second unless you plan on slowing that down. If you shot in 60 frames per second, it would allow you to cut that down to half speed and still make it look fluid and smooth. If you shot it at 120 frames per second, then you'd be able to slow that video down to quarter speed, 25% of the original speed, and make that look fluid. So those are just some of the things that you need to think about on frame rate. As far as making your field of view more narrow, either on the medium view or the narrow view, the only time that you need to do that is if you're actually going to pull it off the bike and shoot a shot of you going through the shot, or one of your friends going through the shot. And I'll often, if all I have with me is a GoPro video camera, then I will change my field of view, and that's the FOV. I will turn that down to narrow. Now, what you have to keep in mind then is that you're giving you can kind of think of your camera as like a funnel. It's kind of projecting a funnel out, and that funnel will be much more narrow. It'll be a little bit more zoomed in. It'll look like that, at least anyway, and you're just going to get a much smaller cone out of that thing when you're taking in the footage. The upside, though, is that footage is going to look more realistic. It's not going to be as distorted, and so you're going to get a better video out of that thing if you're just using this as like a video camera. Obviously, at a wide angle, then you can get real close to things, and I do suggest that if you're going to shoot at wide angles with the GoPro, get up close on something. That's kind of what wide angles are designed for, is to get real up close and get a lot of stuff in the frame. So you can also set the max ISO on your GoPro, especially if you're using one of the newer ones. A lot of these will have the ability for you to set the maximum ISO. That's the maximum sensitivity that the sensor is going to have. I like to set that right around 1600. And the reason why is sometimes when you go into, I swear, the GoPros tend to overexpose a lot of shots, at least in my opinion, with my experience shooting in Protune mode. The GoPro tends to overexpose a lot of times, and when you allow the GoPro camera to go up to whatever ISO it wants to, then it will just go up to these crazy ISOs. You'll get a lot of noisy film. And me personally, I'd rather have a little bit darker footage and not so much noise in the shot than letting the GoPro just go crazy on the ISOs and blow all the footage out. Because I feel like I'm always dropping the levels down in post anyway to try to drop the exposure, if you will. So that's just another thing to be thinking about. There's a lot of other things that we could get into, but this is just a basic video of some of the things that I like to do with my cameras. The main thing is to get it mounted in the right position that you want to, and then go out there and shoot. Take some footage with it. Just one final note that I'll say, if any of you guys have seen those promo videos for GoPro where you see them in stores and you see them on displays and stuff, and it's like, look at all the awesome stuff and we took this all on GoPro stuff. And then you go home and you take your footage and it's nowhere nearly as good as what they did. Let me just give you, just kind of help you understand what's going on. Those are professional photographers that are using that GoPro, and maybe they just put it on some athlete or whatever, and he's doing a whip on a dirt bike, or they're going scuba diving, or they're doing some other thing. They have phenomenal light, and then those video clips are edited heavily in post-production. So they're using really, really good editing software. They're much better editors and they're much better filmographers than I am or you are. And they're taking that footage and they're making the GoPro look unbelievable. And when you get home and you take some of your footage of you climbing around on some mountain or something like that, it doesn't look as good. Just know your video isn't going to look as good as the professionals do, even if you're using the exact same equipment as them, because they have tricks that they'll do in post. They'll make sure they have fantastic lighting, and then you only see the highlight reel of the very, very, very best stuff that they took with that camera. So when you do yours, you're seeing everything, and some of it's good and some of it's not. And just keep that in mind, that not everything you take with your camera is going to be good. And if you're not editing some of the levels in post and you're not doing some of that stuff, you're going to have less than stellar results, and you're like, hey, what gives here? It's a lot of this stuff comes in editing in post to make them look phenomenal. My videos don't look phenomenal. My GoPro footage, a lot of it, and then YouTube, it will kind of buffers it, kind of compresses it down to the point where some of the time I look at my stuff on YouTube and I see some of the GoPro footage and I'm like, dang, that looks like crap. Looks pretty good on my computer here with my editing software and stuff, but it looks like crap on YouTube. So it's just one of those things, man. Anyway, hopefully that gives you some idea of how to improve your GoPro footage. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.